House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. The committee is resuming its study of the use of social media platforms for data harvesting and unethical or illicit sharing of personal information with foreign entities. La réunion aujourd'hui se déroule.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format in accordance with the regulations. Members are attending in person or via Zoom.
The microphones because it could cause injury to our interpreters. And I'd like to now welcome our witnesses for the first hour as individuals Brett Carraway, Associate Professor of Media Economics, University of Toronto, and Emily Laidlaw, Associate Professor and Canada Research Chair in Cybersecurity Law, University of Calgary. Now, before you begin, I did receive, the bells are ringing. I received unanimous consent from the committee to begin this meeting for the opening statements in advance of the votes. So I am going to start with you, and I appreciate the indulgence of committee members for allowing that to happen so that we can listen to our witnesses. Mr. Carraway, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir, and then you'll be followed by Ms. Laidlaw. Mr. Carraway, go ahead.
I would like to thank the members of the committee for the opportunity to speak today. I'm an associate professor of media economics at the University of Toronto. I appear here today in a personal capacity, and the views expressed are mine and mine alone. I want to speak about the risks posed by the underlying incentive structure of social media platforms. In doing so, I hope to convey some sense of the changes that have transpired in our media landscape and why there are too often divergences between public and private interests. Digital platforms are a major feature of the information economy because of their capacity to reduce market frictions and to lower transaction costs. To understand what I'm talking about, imagine how a social media app like Instagram might make a particular group of users, like amateur photographers or travel enthusiasts, accessible to advertisers who want to target them with commercial messages. In this scenario, there are actually three market actors. There are the users, the advertisers, and the platform operator, each with their own set of incentives. Instagram has a financial incentive to maximize the number of users and their level of engagement. This makes the platform more attractive to advertisers. Advertisers want as much information as possible about the platform's users so that they can minimize uncertainty. And users just want to enjoy the functionality of the platform with as little disruption as possible. Multi-sided markets like this are nothing new. They've been a feature of mass communication systems since the earliest newsletters began selling advertisements in the 1600s. However, terms like niche marketing and targeted advertising only begin to scratch the surface of what actually transpires every time you enter a search query on Google, watch a video on TikTok, like someone's post on Facebook, or retweet something. Information is gathered, auctions take place, and commercial messages are delivered. My concerns are not driven primarily by escalating geopolitical tensions or foreign threat actors, though foreign interference, misinformation, disinformation, and radicalization are all genuine concerns. However, my concern is that the platforms, even when functioning exactly as intended, have adverse impacts on the public sphere. My concern is that the economics of platforms all but guarantees the propagation of disinformation, efforts to influence behavior, and the erosion of individual privacy. My concern is born out of the realization that in the economics of platforms, there is no effective upper limit to the exploitation of human attention. Attention. Attention might refer to the ability to concentrate on something, but from the perspective of society, attention speaks to our collective ability to recognize problems and opportunities. It speaks to the horizon of our imagination and our creativity. It speaks to our ability to rise to the occasion to meet the world's most pressing problems. It is a renewable resource, but attention isn't like any other resource. You can't hoard it like a precious metal. You can only direct it at something. In fact, that's the economic function of advertising, the allocation of scarce attention among its competing uses. How we choose to allocate our attention is important, both for individuals and society. Our attention shapes who we are, who we might be, and where we might go. Economists often speak of the tragedy of the commons. The origin of the concept is problematic, but as a metaphor, it can be quite useful. The tragedy of the commons alerts us the propensity for overuse and exploitation of finite resources when we allow unfettered access to them. Digital platforms don't merely attempt to measure attention, they seek to modify it, to make it conform with commercial imperatives. But today's attention economy looks less like AMC's Mad Men and more like the speed of light trading that takes place in financial markets. The fundamental economics of this system are inconsistent with robust privacy protections. The overriding economic imperative is to maximize data collection. It's not just the PRC or Russia. It's US firms like Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, and a host of data brokers you have never even heard of. As a consequence, our attention is exhausted. Its quality is diminished, and we have protections to safeguard other resources like water, air, and habitat. We must likewise manage this renewable resource in a similar manner, in a sustainable manner, like we would air, habitat, water. We are at an inflection point in Canada, and it's my hope that we can take concrete steps to empower Canadians by creating a comprehensive regulatory framework for all digital platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caraway. Ms. Laidlaw, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the invitation to address this committee. I'm honored to speak to you from Calgary and the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region and Métis Nation of Alberta. I've had the opportunity to listen to some of the witnesses and discussion leading up to my appearance. With my time, I would like to pull us back to look at the broader legal issues at play. My key message is that this is not just about privacy. Privacy is one piece of the pie. For example, Discord does not use tools to detect child sexual abuse content or monitor or offer a tool for reporting live streamed content, so a recipe for disaster. This is a safety design problem, not only a privacy one. This is about platform regulation. The health of our information ecosystem depends on privately owned platforms, the choices they make, and their design of their products, corporate governance, culture, and content moderation systems. In short, platforms have tremendous power. Canada is currently a laggard in regulating platforms. Much of what this company has discussed would be addressed by online harms legislation, which we do not yet have in Canada. Europe, the UK, Australia, they all have laws to address these issues. In some cases, they are on their third or second generation law. Canada has 0 federal laws that apply generally to platform regulation. We can learn from the good and bad of these other laws, but it is time to act now. So what do we need, and what are the areas we must be careful about? First, platform regulation is a field like protecting the environment, and multiple areas of law must work in concert to protect our safety and rights. In particular, privacy law and online harms legislation are mutually reinforcing, so we need both. For example, algorithms that push harmful content do so by harvesting personally identifiable information, which is covered by privacy law. But the algorithm can also draw from anonymized aggregate data, which fall outside of privacy law. Online harms legislation can better target the choices platforms make about their product design and content moderation system. Social media mines data to determine likes and interests, but it is what it does with this that online harms laws can address, such as Meta amplifying emotive and toxic content on Facebook by treating angry and love reactions as 5 times more valuable than likes. This fueled the spread of mis and disinformation. Second, platforms are part of the solution. They can be important collaborators and innovators in solving problems. There is, however, a friction when they're almost state-like in their role. Some have their own national security teams, essentially setting national security policy. We also depend on platforms to go above and beyond the law, addressing hateful content, disinformation, violent extremism, all of which are not necessarily illegal. But that is not a substitute for law to set industry standards, and standards are needed. The examples I gave were of platforms with relatively sophisticated governance structures. There are many popular platforms that minimally govern the risks of their products. Third, when we talk about the risks of harm, we should be clear that not all risks are the same. Child protection, hate and terrorist propaganda, disinformation, violence, they all have different dynamics and should not be distilled to one legal rule, except for the basic idea of corporate due diligence. Further, when we talk about the risks of harm, this includes risks to fundamental rights. the right to freedom of expression, privacy, equality. Any analysis of solutions in law or governance must be through the lens of protection and promotion of rights. This is particularly challenging to address mis and disinformation because, except in narrow circumstances, it is lawful to believe and share false information. So I will leave you with this. What are the basic components needed in online harms legislation? Platforms should have a duty to manage the risks of harm of their products, a duty to protect fundamental rights, transparency obligations matched with a way to vet transparency through audits and access to data by vetted researchers. Creation of a regulator to investigate companies and educate the public, and access to recourse for victims. This is a collective harm, but also an individual one. Thank you, and I welcome questions.
Thank you, Ms. Laidlaw. We're going to ask you to be patient because we've got roughly 11 minutes left before the vote. That should take around another 10 minutes or so, so we should be back in 25 minutes with our first round of questioning, if that's okay, if you can hang on. I am going to suspend the meeting for the vote. We'll be back right after. Thank you. I do note that there is closure and a vote that's imminent, so we've got roughly about 45, 50 minutes here. We've had the opening statements from the witnesses, and we appreciate your patience again. We're going to start our first round of 6-minute questioning with Mr. Couric. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. And I appreciate as well in your statements you had provided a number of practical suggestions. And as always, feel free to follow up if there's anything additional. Mr. Caraway, one of I found some of your work very interesting because the economics of social media is certainly a fascinating subject because it's that balance between a service that is perceived to be free versus the costs associated with something that is quite expensive to run, like a social media platform. So in terms of when talking about regulations and managing that, how does that get balanced in the in a consumer's desire to not have to pay for a service, but the demands associated with running a massive web operation?
Yeah, it's a great question. The thing that I always tell my students is that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Even though it appears that you're getting these services for free, even if it's an advertising supported model of some kind, you're paying for that when you purchase a good or service later on. So most of these platforms that we're talking about in the social media realm run as multi-sided marketplaces, and it is quite difficult to keep everybody happy. As I alluded to, you're trying to keep the advertisers happy, but the advertisers want as much information as possible about the users. The users just want to be left alone and use the platform, but they also don't necessarily want to pay for it. That's never a popular thing, except maybe in some online streaming context when you're looking at services like Spotify or Netflix. And so, but even in the subscription-based models, even a company like Netflix that isn't necessarily doing the same sort of data harvesting that a company like Meta or Alphabet is doing, they also are gathering data on how the users use the platform and are deploying AI for recommendation systems, et cetera. So there's always an economic imperative for the advertisers to demand more data, therefore the platform operators will harvest more data. I think that speaks to the need for the government to step in and say, well, here are the enumerated rights that we consider privacy for citizens. And I don't mean just including it in a preamble, but actually putting those in legal tests. So
And if I could, and I apologize because we only have a very limited time here. Now, if I could just ask you to follow up on that in about 30 seconds, because I'd like to ask some more questions. But the specific context into making sure kids are protected in that, could you maybe expand a little bit about how that plays into making sure that kids are protected from online harms and what that looks like in the context of young people?
Yeah, sure. So that's supposed to be part of Bill C-27, right? Is the formulations of some sort of protections for minors. And if you listen to someone like a representative from TikTok, they will tell you that they have a self-regulation and that they're at the vanguard of that. So 18 and under can't live stream. The privacy settings are by default for 16 and under, or 16 and under also are limited to 60 minutes. But these are settings that can just be changed. And so I think it is important for the government to step in and help parents out because they are literally overwhelmed by all of the different social media platforms. And of course, teens are on these platforms, depending on who you ask, 4 to 5 hours a day.
Okay, thank you very, very much for that. And yeah, just to emphasize, to help parents out, that's a great line there. Ms. Laidlaw, you're talking about protecting young people. And there's the range of harms on social media from things like bullying and all the way up to things like the most heinous types of exploitation and the things associated with human trafficking and child exploitative material and that sort of thing. So in the context of social media and young people, what's the government's role in terms of developing regulations and then social media platforms' role role in terms of trying to create frameworks that deal with a massive range of possible challenges that we face here. And it's about a minute and a bit left. I know it's a big question, so hopefully that's enough time for you to give some feedback to the committee.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, it's an enormous question, but it's the money question, right? And I will keep it brief and state that it's crucial that government plays a role, because thus far we've mostly relied on corporate self-governance, and it hasn't worked. I mean, we're seeing all kinds of harms happen online. What we do need, though, is a regulator, because a regulator can be more agile in dealing with this. It's too cumbersome for some of these concerns to work through the courts. We need the help to sort of set practices. But each platform is different. And so the platforms really do need to come up with solutions for their spaces. It's just there needs to be a method to hold them accountable for it, right? That they need to basically demonstrate to some regulator the steps that they're taking to protect children. I think we do need to divvy up the harms. If you're talking about specific child protection measures to look at child sexual abuse images, intimate image abuse, trafficking, these are crimes, and there are the primary actors which need to be, to the extent they can be found and prosecuted, they should be the targets. But there is a separate responsibility and special duties that should exist for platforms.
Okay,
but
thank
when
you.
It comes to
Thank you, Ms. Laidlaw. Yeah, I'm sorry. Worst part of my job.
Fine.
Thanks, guys.
Part of my job
Yeah.
is cutting people off. Ms. Khalid, 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Ms. Laidlaw, you had talked about solutions that, with respect to social media companies. So perhaps just to finish your thought with Mr. Carrick's question as well, if you can also comment on what do you think are good solutions that social media companies can look into and can have best practices for on this.
If I might ask to clarify, are you asking from a corporate governance perspective, or what laws we should pass?
Both, actually.
Okay. And I will say that first, this is a legal question, and we do need the government to pass an online harms legislation, because they need to set the duties for companies. Basically, they need to set minimum standards. And the companies themselves, though, can start taking more seriously protecting children from harms. I think that one of the issues is that a lot of the transparency that we're seeing now tends up to be more of a marketing exercise. It's not as, I think, upfront about what some of these practices are. This is the key aspects. Of course, Dr. Caraway has talked about the attention economy. I think specifically for children, we need to think about this as mind manipulation. And historically, there were interventions in areas of advertising to protect children from mind manipulation, right? That you didn't have certain ads at certain times of day and with children's shows. This is the same thing happening on social media. I mean, there is the pushing suicide content, eating disorder, how-to content, and so on, that it is critical that that these platforms, from a design basis, right? How are we designing this platform? How are algorithms pushing content? How are we nudging certain behaviors? They need to address that and account for that. So I think there should be special duties for children.
Thank you very much. Dr. Caraway, do you have any comments around the remarks for Ms. Laidlaw, and with respect to where's the economy versus mind manipulation or changing of behavior of consumers? And what role does government have to play in that with respect to regulation? I realize and understand that we can't just create regulations where bad actors don't always follow the regulations. So what role do you think government has to play between that balance of economy, efficiency, and mind manipulation?
Well, one of the things that I think is really important, well, kind of two things, is I think we need to really pay very careful attention to what constitutes informed consent. It is problematic to me, the way in which not just children, but also everyday users are confronted with end user license agreements that require someone like Dr. Laidlaw to make sense of them because they are so convoluted and require so much expertise, and they're subject to change almost on a daily basis. So I think it's important to revisit what actually counts as consent here. And then transparency in the way in which the data is used. And this is something where I do think that you need to be able to have something like a privacy commissioner who can send in a third-party auditor to look and see, well, what's actually happening here behind the scenes. And then I would just lastly say the penalties have to have bite to them. So and yeah, $25 million sounds like a lot, but maybe not to a Meta or an Alphabet. 5% of global revenue sounds a little bit more serious. So I like that sort of approach too.
Thank you. And I'll also ask, I mean, we've seen over the past number of years, social media being used as a platform for advocacy, for speaking out and expressing yourself, not just in Canada, but across the world. I know a couple of years ago, we saw on TikTok a young woman putting on makeup, but also talking about issues to kind of go to circumvent the algorithms as to what was being said or what was being displayed. Where is that interlink between social media, freedom of expression, and then making sure that kids in Canada have the safety and security that they need as they navigate through this space as well?
Who would you like to respond to that?
Comments first, Dr. Caraway, and then I'll go to Ms. Laidlaw as well.
We've got roughly a minute, but go ahead, Mr. Caraway.
Maybe since that bears on freedom of expression, Dr. Laidlaw would maybe want to take that one instead of me.
Oh, thanks, Dr. Caraway. I will say freedom of expression is foundational. If you pass a law that just incentivizes a focus on harms, you incentivize companies to put in rudimentary solutions that in fact backfire. And there's been a lot of evidence of backfiring where what ends up being silenced are racialized and other marginalized voices. And so the requirement on companies, if we care about harms, we care about harms to rights. So it needs to be a dual focus that social media companies have. Focusing on how they protect and promote freedom of expression and show that to a regulator, demonstrate the steps that they're taking that are contextual and bespoke to their services.
Thank you very much. And my apologies, Dr. Laidlaw, I didn't address you as I should have. My bad about that.
I did not even notice, though. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kalida. En avant de commencer avec M. Villemure pour
Before we go on to Mr. Villemure for 6 minutes.
Interpretation on if they need it. M. Villemure, commencez, s'il vous plaît.
Merci.
You may start. Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to thank our two panelists for today. Your reputation precedes you. I will start with Dr. Laidlaw. I don't believe you're a fan of auto-regulation. Am I right?
Pardon me, I did not hear the translation.
OK. Je ne crois pas que vous...
I don't believe you are a fan of self-regulation.
No, I am not. But I am a fan of giving room to the companies to come up with the solutions themselves.
D'accord. Si on vous demandait aujourd'hui de...
Very well. If you were asked to establish a regulator, not CRTC necessarily, what would you recommend?
I recommend we create an online safety regulator, and they have an obligation to investigate companies and to audit companies for their compliance with specific duties. And I think that the duty should be a duty to act responsibly, with perhaps a special duty of care to children. And I think that that regulator should also have a very important education role with the public. I think that we have realized that so much of this is about lifting up capacity and understanding of the public and also holding companies accountable.
Est-ce que ce régulateur, ce serait comme le commissaire?
Would that regulator be like the ethics commissioner, a lobbying commissioner, someone appointed by parliament, or rather an official in a department?
I think it's absolutely crucial that this regulator is independent from government, so it would be more akin to the privacy commissioner. And that's because you would be creating a digital human rights regulator. They need to be independent from any pressure when it comes to how to balance rights. It needs to be through a legal lens and a corporate accountability lens. And there needs to be the power to impose quite hefty monetary penalties, which Dr. Caraway mentioned.
Justement, les pénalités dont on parlait un peu.
Exactly. The penalties we talked about, which are a percentage of income instead of the revenue of a fee. All witnesses who came talked about education. The police are talking about education, but no one is telling us who is educating who. Maybe this new regulator would have as a mission education, which could be in school, because we are talking about young people here. But how do you perceive this education? Everyone is in favor of education, but we don't have a solution.
Yes, I think it's crucial it's through the regulator because, and we've seen this in Australia with their e-safety commissioner. So I think that would be the model here for a regulator educator. And I think partly is that the education across the country and in different schools and communities, it varies greatly. And it depends on people reaching out for the information. It depends on schools bringing in the right people. At the moment, there's a lot of just scaring children or parents, and most of the studies show that's ineffective. And I've tried to say that to my children's schools, and they've been really receptive. So I think education's so core to this that the regulator needs that as part of their mandate.
Donc le régulateur pourrait avoir le pouvoir d'être.
So the regulator could have the power to go right down to schools to carry out the education, correct?
Well, that's an interesting question about federal provincial powers, but certainly it could set the curriculum and provide the resources that would hopefully influence different schools and I guess even municipalities and what they're implementing. And so on. So I guess it's the hope that this sort of trickles down. Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately, there's a provincial aspect to this. So if we start seeing provincial regulators appear, then they maybe could work together much as the way we've seen with privacy commissioners.
Non, mais merci. Tu crois, moi, je suis un apôtre friand des.
Thank you. I like respect for provincial jurisdictions. Earlier, you said that Canada was a laggard when it comes to digital legislation. Is it too late? Could we catch up? Is it too late?
We're not too late now, but we will be soon if we don't introduce laws. Europe and the UK just passed their online safety legislation, or the Digital Services Act, back in earlier this year, or in the last year, and they're in the midst of implementing it. I mean, if you cast forward 5 years, what I think we're going to see is more coordinated global investigations of companies, which takes care of some of the cross-border issues. If Canada doesn't move on this in the next year or so, I think that they will fall woefully behind. But right now, we do have a late mover advantage.
Dites-moi seulement un mot, puis qu'il nous reste 30 secondes.
I have 30 seconds left. Bill C-27. What is the state of that?
Well, I mean, I fully support the recommendations for amendments by Commissioner Dufresne about Bill C-27. So I think it needs to be amended. I think that it only solves part of the problem because it's still a consent paradigm. And as long as it relies on consent, it doesn't dive into some of the more problematic aspects of social media and their influence, which really nobody can consent to. So unless we wholly change Bill C-27, which I don't think we'll do, we need online harms legislation. I do think the AI Act is problematic and needs to be kind of pulled out of Bill C-27 and reworked. It absolutely should not be set up under ICED as a commissioner within that body.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Ville.
Thank you, Mr. Vilmia.
And the votes, what I'm thinking, and I want you to think about this as well, we can go 6 minutes with Mr. Green. We're going to need some time to switch over to the next panel. We could have the opening statements. I expect that we're going to have 2 opening statements in the next panel. And that would take us roughly up to the time of votes. But that would end this round after Mr. Green. And I would encourage our witnesses to submit any additional thoughts that they may have. Mr. Green, go ahead for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to pick up on some of this, particularly around C-27. I myself think that portion of the bill should have been better dealt with here under an ethical framework rather than an industry one. Dr. Layla, can you just talk about maybe the ethics of AI and why, from a legal framework, those considerations in terms of legitimacy of democracy, the ways in which it's undermining society would probably be best situated as a carve-out, as you just suggested?
I mean, that's a great question. Thank you. And I think that, we have seen just in the last year the way that AI has transformed our society, and we're just at the beginning of that journey. And the problem with the AI Act as it stands right now is that it's not sufficiently developed to be able to actually cope with the different problems that we're going to face. And so it needs to be carved out so that we can actually sit down and have a proper discussion about what are the ways that AI can be used that fundamentally will disrupt democracy, will interfere with our ability to make decisions, will create physical risks to us, individually or just collectively. And we need to break down those various risks and the opportunities and draft a legislation that reflects that. I think we do have a model as well in in Europe with the EU that can help us. But as it stands, the AI Act can't just be amended.
I want to get more specific, particularly,
Okay.
you referenced the undermining of democracy. I'll reference the case of Cambridge Analytica, where we know that Facebook did not undertake sufficient oversight to ensure the use of data was done according to its own terms and services. And I think I heard in your testimony, that having the industry regulate itself is a problem, although they might be able to present some solutions. So how confident should we be that social media companies have a full grasp of how their data is being used and whether the data is being properly protected? Or further to that, do you think they know and just perhaps allow it to happen anyways?
I think it's a bit of both. I think that they are not providing the full picture. I do not think that they fully know what is happening. A colleague of mine, Joel Reardon, for example, he has done some reverse engineering of various apps that say that they put in place all the child protection measures. And what has been revealed through this is that many apps are not. So essentially what we're relying on is people to find this out and for scandal. That's just woefully insufficient here. So transparency on its own is meaningless. We actually need some sort of avenue to investigate and audit and lift the lid on these companies. Otherwise, we end up with the crises like Cambridge Analytica.
And let's go back to that. So in your opinion, are there ways through legislation or regulation that the federal government could do a better job of protecting the personal information that is collected and used by these platforms?
Well, I think that one thing we need to look more closely at are what the no-go zones are, because there's actually certain forms of collecting data that should be seen as wholly inappropriate, and I think we've still relied so much on consent that has...
Can you give us a couple of examples for the purpose of your testimony?
I think that one of the examples might be just the terms and conditions on social media, that we will agree to the harvesting of all kinds of data for whatever purposes because we want to use that app. Most of the studies show that what we're all undergoing is privacy fatigue, where we essentially know it's bad for us, but agree to it anyway. So essentially, and this is really paternalistic, this is the problem, what we're saying is people shouldn't be agreeing to this because they don't really understand what they're agreeing to. I think it's then being sold on to data brokers, which Dr. Caraway talked about, and then we lose control of and we don't actually know what happens to the data. California does a better job with their law of basically saying you need to be able to track that data and who it all goes to be able to, if you're going to rely on consent, you can then withdraw that consent and know where that data goes. All those are avenues through data protection and privacy laws.
That's very helpful, and it gives me a good segue to Mr. Caraway. You've mentioned some social media apps take a drift net approach to data collection. Are you able to discuss which apps take this approach and whether or not our current legislation provides sufficient protection?
Yeah, so there's a lot of data that's harvested by even the most prominent social media companies. So this is everyone from Facebook to, I would include Google, but also Instagram, TikTok. And they'll collect everything that you post, so all of your personal data, but they'll also track all of your so-called transactional data and interaction data. Facebook is successful because it's able to leverage your social connections at scale. Google is successful because it can leverage your purchasing intent at scale. So those
When you say at scale, for the purpose of the public and the testimony, what do you mean at scale?
So they can take this information, use it in a digital context, package it with almost zero marginal cost, and then sell it to data brokers. The Cambridge Analytica thing is a great example because actually the initial data harvesting that happened didn't violate Facebook's terms at the time. They had a reciprocal data exchange agreement in place. It was only when the This Is Your Digital Life shared it with Cambridge Analytica that the actual scandal happened, because that's how they
I got 20 seconds left.
Policies.
Do you know of any restrictions on how data can be used? Or can we as individuals limit or find out how our data is being used?
So, I mean, most of the provisions right now are the same old things that have been in PIPEDA since, 2000, the year 2000, I suppose, which is why we're now revisiting it. The things that we need right now are an enumerated right to privacy that's part of a legal test when you're thinking about an injunction or a fine.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I'm glad you were keeping track because we hit the wrong button on the phone and we lost track. So you could have had another 2 minutes if you wanted. We're
going to go back to.
First of all, I want to thank our guests for appearing today. As I mentioned earlier, if there's any other information that you would like to submit to the committee in consideration of this report, please do so to the clerk. I want to apologize first and foremost for the disruptions today and for the disruption last week. I wasn't feeling well. I appreciate your patience coming back to committee this week and sharing the information that you did. Thank you, Ms. Laidlaw, Mr. Carraway. We're going to suspend for a couple minutes. We're going to come back with our new panel and provide opening statements. We've got a bit of time for that, so let's suspend for a minute or two. Thank you. Welcome everyone back. Now I'd like to welcome our witnesses for the second part of our meeting today. As an individual, Mr. Matt Malone, Assistant Professor, Thompson Rivers University. Welcome, Mr. Malone. And from the dais, we've got Sam Andry, who is the Managing Director, and Joe Masudi, who is the Senior Policy Analyst. Just to advise you that we are under an indication of votes. We've got about 27 minutes, so we're going to start with your opening statements. We're going to suspend the meeting, and then we're going to come back for Q&A. So I appreciate your patience on this. Mr. Malone, you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Matt Malone, and I'm an assistant professor here at Thompson Rivers University, Faculty of Law in Kamloops. And today I'm attending the meeting just in a personal capacity. I'm going to use my opening remarks to share my thoughts using a case study, which is specifically regarding the selective ban of TikTok on government-issued devices that was announced in February 2023. As the committee might recall, that selective ban was accompanied with a statement about concerns relating to privacy and security. These stated concerns do not explain several things. First of all, they do not explain why the government waited 5 months to act on the underlying intelligence brief that warned about TikTok's practices. Second, they do not explain why the government continues to buy advertising on TikTok itself. And finally, they do not explain why the government has ignored that TikTok is not the only app that retains user data in foreign jurisdictions and potentially shares it with foreign regimes. As the Treasury Board Secretariat confirmed to me a couple days before this hearing, none of the following apps are banned from download and use on government-issued devices. The Russian-affiliated VKontakte social media app, the Russian-affiliated Yandex app, the Russian-affiliated Mail.ru app, as well as other social media apps like Facebook, Instagram, Tinder, Snapchat, Bumble, Grindr, Truth Social, Gab, and Discord, which was implicated in the 2022-23 Pentagon leaks, and which Dr. Laidlaw noted does not have child safety protection measures in place. As I recommended in a recent article, and as I'll take this opportunity to recommend again now to the President of the Treasury Board, I believe that a better privacy and security baseline would see the government ban all social media apps on government-issued devices unless there's a strong business justification otherwise. It's crazy to me that the apps I just listed are not banned on government-issued devices. I also believe that the government should stop buying ads on all social media services. Even with such bans in place, it is worth noting that federal privacy law places no meaningful constraints on data transfers to jurisdictions like Russia and China. An internal government brief that I obtained through the Access to Information Act notes that Bill C-27, the proposed privacy legislation currently before Parliament, specifically avoided putting into that bill any new or European-style restrictions on the transfer of personal information across borders, specifically out of deference to commercial interests. It's very telling that the privacy bill before Parliament is being stewarded by the industry portfolio in Cabinet, not a portfolio in human rights, public safety, or national security. Like many social media apps, TikTok does deserve opprobrium for its privacy violations, data harvesting and narrative control practices, and for granting access to data despite assurances otherwise. Like other social media apps, it is a vector for online harm visited on young people, and its business model is focused on privacy-invasive targeted advertising that exacerbates the mental health crises affecting young people. The app's safety features for children are all easy to bypass. Through various access to information requests, I've seen several internal briefings where Canadian government actors repeatedly identify these problems, and I'm happy to talk about these. But it's important to note that the real culprit here is Canadian law, because it does not stop these practices for TikTok or any other social media service. As TikTok lobbyists appearing before this committee repeatedly underscored, TikTok's handling of Canadian user data is governed by Canadian law, and that's the problem. Canada's privacy laws fail to respect the rights and interests of individuals and collectives in the digital age. Enforcement is basically non-existent. At the federal level, the Privacy Commissioner has become skilled at making fanfare announcements about its investigations, but it is very slow at investigating, as I learned in my own complaint about the ArriveCan app, which was ultimately sustained. Law enforcement has struggled to adapt to the new digital landscape as well. The RCMP's National Cybercrime and Fraud Reporting System, which this committee recently heard about in glowing terms as part of this study, is actually 2 years behind schedule, still in beta testing, and says on its website that it only accepts 25 complaints per day nationwide. To give members another illustrative example, as I learned in a recent access to information request, the RCMP's cybercrime investigative team only has 8 employees in all of Alberta. Here in British Columbia, where there was a recent tragic sextortion case involving a young person that was carried out over social media, there are only 4 employees on the cybercrime investigation team for the entire province. There are none in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or any of the maritime provinces. With privacy and data protection legislation that deprives citizens of meaningful protection, government funding priorities deeply out of alignment with stated values and actual needs, and gaps in law and policy that the government shows no urgency to fill, the federal government's policies and practices pose significant challenges to addressing the real types of harms that we are seeing perpetuated these days on social media. To wrap up, I want to thank the committee for their unexpected invitation, and I also want to make a particular shout out and appreciation to the MP for Mississauga Erin Mills for her leadership on this very important issue. I've been very impressed with her work on this file. I look forward to answering to the best of my abilities any questions that the committee members might have during questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. We certainly appreciate your kind words on our honorable colleague, Mr. Andre and Mr. Masudi. I understand that you're going to split your time. You have up to 5 minutes. Whoever wants to start, go ahead, please.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the invitation to share our perspectives on this important issue. Good evening. I'm Sam Andre. I'm the managing director of the DAIS. We're a policy think tank at Toronto Metropolitan University, where we work to develop the people and ideas we need to advance an inclusive and innovative economy, education system, and democracy for Canada. I have my colleague with me here, Joe Masudi, and together with our former colleague, Yuan Stevens, we published a report 3 years ago called Home Ice Advantage that examined the subject before the committee today on transborder data security of social media platforms. While a lot has changed in the last 3 years, the core challenge of inadequate protection for Canadians remains.
Social media platforms collect, transfer, and store a wide variety of personal and sensitive information, including personal identifying information, private messages, location, financial information, and biometric data. These platforms have been purposefully designed to keep individuals online and engaged to reap as much data on and about them as possible. Through the aggregation of this data, it is possible to create detailed profiles and inferences about individuals, including about their political opinions, sexual orientation, religion, income, health, or details about their families. This is true of TikTok, but also of most major online platforms. Despite the significant risks to Canadians through the potential misuse of this data, there are currently inadequate protections over how Canadians' personal data is transferred and stored, particularly outside of Canada. This threatens Canadian sovereignty and the digital security and privacy of Canadians. Personal data can be accessed by national security and law enforcement agencies in countries without sufficient legal protection, such as in China. But I think it is also worth adding that technology companies can experience buyouts, mergers, and bankruptcy that can change where and how personal data is stored and the privacy protection they receive. Finally, malicious actors can also always take advantage of data with insufficient safeguards.
In our annual survey of online harms, we've found that Canadians have very low trust in social media platforms, both to keep their data secure and to act in the best interest of the public, ranking well below other technology companies and other organizations of a variety of types. In fact, trust in TikTok specifically fell significantly last year to last place. Only 7% of Canadians say they have a high degree of trust in the platform, despite its rapid growth, with nearly 30% of Canadians using the platform. TikTok has been the subject of particular scrutiny given its corporate structure. As was pointed out earlier in the committee, prior to 2019, TikTok's privacy policy was transparent in stating, we share your information with any member or affiliate of our group in China. This line was later updated to remove that specific location reference, but the sharing provision remains. That same provision is also in WeChat's privacy policy, which is used by 6% of Canadians, and as our colleague, Mr. Malone, has pointed out, is true of many others. Canada's current privacy law does not prohibit companies from transferring personal data to third parties or outside of Canada in this way. There is an opportunity, we think, before the parliamentarians to respond to these risks through the proposed Bill C-27, but as it currently stands, Bill C-27 would in some ways allow even easier data sharing to take place between corporate actors by eroding what limited consent provisions do exist, The new Section 18 creates new large carve-outs for companies to share data without both knowledge and consent through the inclusion of language like business activities and legitimate interest. We don't think it should be the exclusive responsibility of Canadians to educate and protect themselves online. We would propose that there be more precise requirements added to the bill to ensure equivalent levels of protection are provided for data when transferred outside of Canada. And we would also suggest requirements that mirror the EU's GDPR that obtain explicit informed consent from Canadians for the transfer of their personal data to jurisdictions that cannot provide equivalent levels of protection, providing information both about the specific countries involved and the specific data. While lots of people have pointed out to this committee that there's consent fatigue, we at least think transparency with respect to data transfer to countries outside of Canada is important. We'll end by saying that Canadians overwhelmingly support such a change. A representative survey that we conducted found that 86% of Canadians support requirements to keep Canadians' data in Canada, with only 3% disagreement. Thanks for your time, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Andre and Mr. Massoudi. Je pense que Mr. Gould est prêt.
I believe Mr. Gould is ready with his questions. For 6 minutes. You may start, Mr. Gould. You'll be followed by Ms. Khalid, and then we'll stop for the vote. So you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. My question goes to all the witnesses. I have the impression that Canadians are expecting the government to protect them against digital harm, but the witnesses have also told us here in this committee that we are lagging behind other legislations like the ones in Europe. Do you believe that we are that late and that we need to act fast to be up to date compared to other legislations in the world elsewhere? Anyone can answer.
Well, I'm happy to jump in. So I believe one of the problems that Canada faces is that we're not a large power, and we're stuck between approaches to privacy and data protection among large powers that are diametrically opposed. And so failing to act soon locks us into one of those approaches. The Europeans have adopted a more restrictive approach ever since the drafting and passage and implementation of the GDPR. You've seen an array of restrictive measures, which are leading to things like data localization, stricter requirements around data transfers, a robust equivalency test. And then the United States is taking a diametrically opposed approach with its regulatory framework, where it has not updated its privacy legislation, and there's no uniform privacy legislation in the United States. At the same time that the US is doing that, it's exporting through trade treaties and governance bodies worldwide a view of data governance and privacy that locks in what Canada can do. So discussions around data transfers have to take into consideration the fact that the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement has a prohibition on restricting cross-border data flows, and it has other restrictions that are relevant as well. CPTPP has similar restrictions. So one of the problems with Canada's failure to act is that we're getting locked into one of these approaches. And unfortunately, we show no urgency around acting. The Privacy Act, which regulates government conduct, hasn't been updated in over 40 years. And PIPEDA is, well in need of an update, a meaningful update, not just tweaks. And I personally don't believe that C27 is the appropriate version to do that. But I'll let the other panelists chime in.
I would maybe just quickly add that I agree with the premise of your question that we are falling behind in some respects. I think, though, we have, as Dr. Laidlaw put it, a second mover advantage to learn from some of the lessons and some of the flawed legislation or approaches that have been passed in allied jurisdictions. And I think on AI regulation specifically, Canada is moving quickly as it relates to the rest of the world. Which I think is a good thing. But I would say, yes, we need to move more quickly, and Bill C-27 is part of that.
My next question goes to Mr. Maloney. You talked about the capacities, insufficient capacity at the RCMP. We received them, and they seem to say that they have the capacity for investigations. Clearly, they didn't tell us whether they could do more investigations or not at all. What are your concerns concerning the lack of capacity by the RCMP to carry out investigations?
Are available. They're not meeting the demand. So in 2018, when the cyber sort of public safety went through a cybersecurity update and threw a lot of money at the RCMP to get more serious about online cybercrime. That was when the initial announcement was made about the national NC3, the National Cybercrime Coordination Center. And I wrote about this 3 years ago and said, you know, we're already waiting a long time to get this rollout happening. But fast forward 3 years, and now that reporting system is 2 years behind schedule. And if you go and visit the website right now, it'll tell you that the system is still in beta testing and that it only accepts 25 cybercrime complaints for the entire country a day, which is really low. So in a series of access to information requests regarding the number of resources that were devoted in terms of personnel, I discovered that there are several provinces that don't have any cybercrime investigators, which is a really shocking statistic. And here in BC, the third largest province in the country, we only have 4 full-time people on the cybercrime team. So I do believe that these tools need to be rolled out more rapidly, and there should be more transparency around them. And legislation should be crafted around what we're seeing, because these tools allow us to understand what types of harms are being perpetuated. You know, there's all kinds of analysis you can run based on the reporting data that comes in. And NC3 shows that ransomware, more than half of the reports that go to NC3 are about ransomware. So it's really interesting that Canadian legislation ignores ransomware, which is the biggest threat that cybercrime, the biggest cybercrime threat that we're facing. So one of the things that's interesting to take into consideration when we talk about Bill C-27 is also Bill C-26, which would regulate things like ransomware for critical industries.
Monsieur Malone, on a presque terminé.
Mr. Malone, the money invested by the government in the RCMP or on safety of platforms, do you think that we are getting what we have gained the benefit of the money?
For the RCMP in this area, frankly.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Gould.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for coming before us today and shedding light on this very important issue. Mr. Malone, I'll perhaps start with you by asking, we had representatives of TikTok come into our committee, and through them we learned that the majority of Canadian data is actually not stored in Canada. It is stored elsewhere across the world, including Malaysia, Singapore, etc. What are the legal implications of that with respect to Canadians' privacy rights?
Thanks for the question. I think it's really important to identify the TikTok representatives who spoke as lobbyists. They're registered lobbyists and they do lobbyist work. And I think it's important to talk about a lot of the claims that they made were very disingenuous. There are easy bypasses around a lot of the safety controls for children that they vaunted. And TikTok has been caught, to respond more directly to your question, engaging in all kinds of worrying conduct with respect to user data. There's public reporting that talks about TikTok accessing physical locations of journalists who are using the app in order to track down their sources. That's in the public domain. There's public reporting about TikTok directing user data through China, despite assurances, user data from the United States, I should say, through China, that was despite assurances otherwise. And there's a raft of other reporting. There's internal government reporting from Canadian government actors like the Privy Council Office's Intelligence Assessment Secretariat, which identifies all other kinds of problems around the type of data and the persistent collection of data that occurs through the app. And there's also materials that I've seen from the Cyber Threat Intelligence Unit at Cyberforce Intelligence Command at the Department of National Defense, which also identifies a series of concerning problems around censorship and so forth. When it comes to data transfers, one of the really difficult issues here is that Canadian law is very permissive when it comes to data transfers. Even if you look at the proposed privacy legislation, Bill C-27, there's essentially nothing that would stop data transfers outside of Canada. And certainly the privacy notice for TikTok states that by using TikTok, you accept a term and condition, which is that the subsidiary TikTok can share that data with its corporate body, ByteDance. And Canadian law lets that happen. Even the proposed Canadian law would let that happen. Section 19 and Section 11 sub 1 or 11.1 of C27 specifically permit this type of data transferring. Canadian data transfer law is essentially premised on this idea that organizations can send to other organizations if they deem the protections are sufficient or adequate as they would be in Canada. And this approach is really different from the European approach, which is jurisdictionally grounded. So country to country, you can't transfer data outside of a country unless you're satisfied that the protections would be essentially equivalent. So there's a really big difference in Canadian data transfer law than the European data transfer law. And so once data gets out of Canada, there's really no telling what happens to it. And they don't take basic safeguards, like you do. I mean, before this meeting, I asked the Chief Information Officer of the House of Commons where the data was being localized and processed for Zoom, which I would be using. And I was told, and I was very happy and impressed by this, that the data would be processed in Canada. And for your in-camera meetings, they're even more secure. So good on you. But sad for the users of TikTok.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Now, in previous interviews, you've talked about power imbalances with users and the collection of vast amounts of data. What did you mean by that? Can you expand on that a little bit for us?
Like many folks who've appeared before this committee and committees dealing with related topics, I have a lot of concerns about how these power imbalances affect users' ability to offer consent that is meaningful and that is informed. When you click accept on a very lengthy privacy notice, your ability to offer or provide consent is really challenged when the power imbalances that exist are such that you are an individual user and the company that might be collecting the data might have a market valuation that exceeds the size of a G7 country.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Now, to Mr. Audrey and Mr. Masudi, you've authored or contributed to a report that has surveyed online harms in Canada as it relates to social media platforms in the public square. Can you tell us a little bit more about your key findings of this report and speak specifically about the way that vulnerable, marginalized communities and groups are targeted online?
Sure, yeah, happy to. And Joe, feel free to jump in here. But yeah, we do an annual survey of a representative of group of Canadians to track basically Canadians' experiences online with harmful content or illegal experiences. So maybe just at a high level, start with hate speech. 40% of Canadians say they see hate speech online at least monthly, and about 10% of Canadians say they personally have been targeted by online hate speech. But those rates are about double to triple for a variety of marginalized communities, racialized communities, about double that rate to us LGBTQ Canadians, 3 times that rate, 30% say they've been personally targeted with hate speech. So there's kind of a tracking of that. We also track exposure to and belief in misinformation, disinformation. We have Canadians do a quiz, basically, of a series of true and false statements, and find that about 15% of Canadians we assess as having a high degree of belief in misinformation, and those Canadians are more likely to say they consume their news on social media and are less trusting of mainstream media sources.
Okay, I'm going to, Mr. Andre, I'm going to have to stop you there, sir. I apologize for that. Quand on retourne, on va commencer avec M. Villemure pour...
When we come back, we'll be starting with Mr. Villemure, who will have 6 minutes. So the session is suspended for the vote.
Before we're back, so I appreciate your patience. Thank you. Meeting's suspended.
with our next round of questions. Mr. Villemure, you have 6 minutes. You may start.
Monsieur Villemure.
Mr. Villemure, you are muted. Thank you, Chair, for the great advice. It's a pleasure to see you again here. Informed consent, in your opinion, is it impossible, useless, or just a mirage? I think the word mirage is a proper description of today's state of affairs.
All of Canadian privacy law is currently based on it doesn't serve the ends that we really need data protection and privacy law in this country to serve. The reality that C27 has perpetuated this, the idea that this instrument will still work and still serve its ends, even with the legitimate business exceptions, even with the rules around implied consent, really won't take us to a place where we have robust privacy and data protection law in this country. I think you need to fundamentally shift the paradigm so that possessing, retaining, using, disclosing personal information becomes a liability as opposed to a profitable way to run a business, which is what we have let these ad exchanges / social media companies do.
That's a good way of saying that, because in medical terms, we talked about free and informed consent. It's never free. When we talk about informed, it's once again a mirage. You also mentioned that we are an average power when we are talking about this field. When we compare ourselves with Europe, the United States, and maybe China, where's the hope that the Canadian legislation may find its proper place someday?
To reclaim a bit of the traditional role that we like to see Canada have, which is serving as a middle power with allied states. So several ideas have been floated around creating safe data flow zones that map onto the alliances, the security alliances that already exist, like NATO, for example. We already have a commitment to mutual defense with our NATO allies. It would seem logical that we might feel comfortable sharing our data, our personal information, with these allies in a free cross-border data flow zone. So there are opportunities for Canada to certainly create a niche role when it comes to the regulation and creating regulatory frameworks for cross-border data flows. But I think the more appalling concern that I have is with the state of the current law. The fact that a lot of Canadian law, and certainly the priorities of legislators right now, is to create privacy law that applies only to the private sector. I think one of the real problems that we've seen, and we saw this through the pandemic as well, is that we need robust privacy and data protection laws that also apply to government. I've been really upset at the fact that the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act does not apply to government actions, which is really concerning when you think about the deployment of AI technologies, AI-fueled or driven technologies, such as the ArriveCan app. And I've also been really concerned about the fact that the priorities with Bill C-27 have focused also not on government. To me, it's disturbing that this effort has been led by the industry portfolio, and C-27 would create new regulatory instruments that would be answerable to the Minister of Industry. It's really hard to say that we're approaching privacy from a human rights or a law enforcement or a national security perspective when the bodies that we're creating are not truly independent, and not only are not truly independent, but they're subservient to an industry portfolio whose mandate is to grow the economy.
Croyez-moi que je partage vos craintes.
I totally share your fears on that topic. The same question to you, Mr. Andre. Canada is a middle power between the United States, the EU, and China. What could we propose that could be acceptable?
I honestly echo a lot of what was just said. I think there's an ability to build on. Maybe I'll speak specifically with respect to online harms legislation. Germany was a first mover and basically created a 24-hour takedown regime, and the outcome was an overcensorship response from many of the large platforms. They didn't want to deal with the liability, so they removed too much lawful expression. We have an opportunity to learn from mistakes like that.
Je vous interromps un instant, si vous permettez, le temps filant, si vous pouvez nous envoyer quelques informations sur ce.
Could you please send us some information on what happened in Germany? I would like to ask one last question before my time runs out. Do you see a regulator that could be independent, like the ethics commissioner, lobbying, and so on, or some? How do you see this regulator? What powers would that regulator have?
I see a role for a digital regulator. Currently, there's the idea of an AI and data regulator in Bill C-27, but it is an ISED department official, which I think is unacceptable, especially given the minister will have competing roles of championing the economic benefits of AI while regulating its risks. At minimum, it should be appointed by a GIC, but ideally it would be a parliamentary appointment that is separated. And I think you could task the same regulator with the online harms portfolio, or it could be two, but that's a lot of digital regulators. And I think that regulator would have the power to do audits, to perform ombudsman type functions of supporting individuals, as well as transparency function.
Merci.
Régulateur indépendant, donc.
Thank you. So an independent regulator.
Mr. Andre, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Green, 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. In the spirit of shout-outs, I know that there's a shout-out to start the round of testimonies. I want to give a shout-out to Christelle Tosano, who I understand is now policy and research at the Diaz. I know that her work has been reflected in previous committees, as well as some of the deep dives that I've taken into this field. And I know that the technology is often so far ahead of the scope of our subject matter expertise. Having subject matters like yourself is so incredibly important. So I appreciate you all being here today. Appreciate any contributions that she may have made as well. I want to begin with Mr. Malone. In a September 2023 article, you mentioned that you reviewed a government document from the federal government's Economic Security and Technology entitled The TikTok Takeover. Are you able to highlight the concerns raised in this report, and do you share their concerns?
So I'm not sure what document you're referring to. Are you referring to the document that informed the piece for my recommendation to ban all social media applications?
Correct.
On
Yes.
Issued devices.
Yeah. If you've been following the study, you'll note that I, have been very, very adamant about expanding the scope of regulation, oversight, and scrutiny, quite frankly, to all platforms, not just TikTok. So if you care to comment on that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so the document comes from National Defense and from their Cyber Threat Intelligence Unit, and it identifies a series of concerns with respect to TikTok that include surveillance and intelligence operations, privacy violations, data harvesting, political interference, narrative control, and Communist Party of China censorship exports. There's also, in that brief, a series of concerns that are expressed with respect to many other social media companies like Snapchat and LinkedIn. And I'd be very happy to share this brief with the committee if you wish to have it.
That would be very helpful, yes. In your opinion, does the risk of having social media apps on federal government phones differ from that of an employee to have the same apps on their personal phone?
I think with respect to the type of information that's being shared on government-issued devices, it would seem unquestionable that there's probably greater sensitivity, especially when this information, even if on an individual level is harmless, in the aggregate could potentially be useful. You have to think about things like location data, which might reveal things like, the location of politicians or members of the Canadian Armed Forces. There was a story a few years ago this is from public reporting, but there was a story a few years ago about how a leak of location data from like a Fitbit style company led to an ability to map essentially an American military base in Helmand province. So this data is obviously very sensitive in the aggregate. I would say, if you'll permit, to go beyond this, I would say that there should be a ban on social media devices on government issued devices unless there's a strong business justification otherwise. But there's also a very strong indication of what the priorities of government are. Earlier, I talked about a lack of funds for the RCMP cybercrime investigative team. But if you look at the arsenal of folks who work in social media work for the government or communications for the government, it's it's exponentially larger than the types of resources and personnel that we're devoting to fighting online harms as they're actually experienced by some of the most vulnerable Canadians.
And I think you even referenced that it was your opinion we should stop advertising on these platforms. And so when you look at the risk and reward in terms of engagement and getting information out there, it's your testimony and success. It's your position here today that the government should stop, and that would include all platforms?
Yes. I believe that it's unethical to advertise on social media companies if we have real concerns about data harvesting and illicit foreign interference. Last year, the government spent a record $141 million on advertising, which is more than twice what the government spent on the administration of the Access to Information Act. And that included almost $2 million on TikTok. So it's really difficult to attend a committee hearing where there are all these concerns about TikTok's practices, but then to see the government throw money at TikTok, which in my view is an implicit endorsement of those practices that we're seeking to critique. And I do believe, just to clarify and make this point clear, that this concern applies to all social media companies. I was very pleased that the government stopped advertising on Meta over the summer, but that was in retaliation for Meta's conduct with the Online News Act. And so that was a bit of a different
I need to go back to
Even retaliatory, I support it.
I need to go back to Mr. Andre and Mr. Masodi. Has your organization conducted any specific research regarding the sharing of data between social media platforms such as TikTok and foreign entities, both state actors, private sector, or third party, that reuse their data for profiling, marketing, and harmful purposes?
Thanks for the question, and thanks for the shout out to Christelle, who is a wonderful member of our team as well. And I hope that she gets invited one day to this committee or to Indu on AI. But to answer your question, yes. So Joe and I and another colleague, Yuan, wrote a paper that looked at the data storage practices and border data transfers of social media platforms called Home Ice Advantage, and we appreciated the shout out to that report a few meetings ago as well. I think and Joe, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but basically, even the question came up a few rounds ago of, TikTok says they store their data in Singapore and the US, and yes, that's true, but that is an incomplete picture. There can still be remote access of those servers from any country in the world.
Because I'm out of time, could you send us any highlights? It was referenced, but any specific highlights and concerns that you submit to this committee can be used as testimony. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Green, Mr. Andre, and I am going to ask that anything that's been asked of our witnesses to provide something in writing, if you can do that by this Friday, please. That would help the analysts, okay? We have to put a timeline on it. Friday, 5 o'clock, correct? 5 o'clock Friday, if you don't mind. We've got 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, Mr. Barrett for 2.5, then Mr. Kellaway, Mr. Baines, Mr. Villemure, and Mr. Green. That'll bring us home. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Chair. Sorry?
Okay. Yeah,
great.
Sorry.
So we have just a couple of quick minutes. Just quickly from each of the witnesses, if you could. Do you see merit in requiring app stores, like the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, in requiring parental consent for downloading social media apps for children? Let's say my question to previous witnesses was for children under the age of 16. So I'll frame it the same way for each of you, if you could.
I can start. I certainly don't think it would be harmful, and I think the logistics around age verification are tricky, and I probably don't have time to get into all that right now. But I think in principle, yes. But I might even just suggest to go further, since we're talking about trans data storage, which is to say, you could ban the transfer of minors' data to countries with insufficient equivalent protection if you wanted to as well. But just to say yes, I think that would be a fine thing to add.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Malone.
I would not support that. I understand the intent behind the proposal, and I think it's well-intentioned, and I consider that seriously. But I think it would have adverse effects that may not be what is intended. The reality is that we need privacy law that protects children by default, right? It shouldn't be the responsibility of a parent. There are mixed harms and benefits with these technologies, and I don't believe that parents or older generations are the ones that are always the best at navigating these technologies. I've seen lots of surveys from within the Privy Council office itself that show young people are the ones who use these technologies. 30% of teens get their news from TikTok, and a lot of older generations don't use them at all. So one of the concerns I would have is, and I wouldn't feel comfortable trusting, that responsibility to all parents. That's just my personal view. What I would say, though, is I do believe children should be explicitly referenced as a vulnerable population within C27. I think it's unacceptable that children and youth in particular have been removed from C27 and are omitted. And that was a deliberate intent by the Ministry of Industry. And I have an internal brief that talks about the reasons behind that, and I'd be happy to share that with you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Malone. Again, if you can do, sorry, we don't have time, but if you can do that again by Friday at 5, Mr. Malone, we'd appreciate that. Mr. Baines, 2.5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. It's clear we're having a generational risk or danger with online harms, and two tragedies that hit close to home for us in British Columbia. You may recall Amanda Todd's suicide in 2012 linked to online harassment, and the recent news of the 12-year-old boy whose suicide was linked to online sexual extortion. And coincidentally, both my children, I have a 15-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old boy, so it's chilling to hear some of these stories that come out. I'll go to Mr. Malone first. You've noted in a previous interview that collection of vast amounts of data creates, quote, power imbalances with users. Could you please expand on what you mean by that? Oh, you did, sorry.
Yeah, I provided an answer to the MP from Mississauga Erin Mills, but I'm happy to extrapolate a little bit on this, particularly in the context of Chinese influence and control. So there have been declarations that, for example, just to use TikTok, although the comments would apply to other entities too, TikTok collects Canadian user data and stores it in the United States, Singapore, and Malaysia. And according to Chinese law, specifically the National Security Intelligence Law, there are requirements that companies that are operating in China cooperate with China. That's specifically Article 7 of the law I just referenced. And Article 10 of that law provides for extraterritorial application of that law. So it wouldn't matter if the data is residing in a foreign jurisdiction. A company that has a base in China, which it does, and there's a 1% share held by the Chinese state, which allows control over TikTok and ByteDance, it would mean that these problems aren't going to go away.
Okay, and you mentioned several platforms earlier, Bumble and others like that, but what about like messaging platforms like Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp? We've seen a recent report from warning put out by Abbotsford Police where WhatsApp phone calls were made from outside of Canada and trying to making calls, extorting local businesses and artists.
You're over your time, but I do want to hear the response, and I don't know who you're directing it to, but if we can get a quick response, please.
I'll direct that to Mr. Malone again, please.
Mr. Malone, quickly.
I believe that the same reasons why folks are using Signal to evade law enforcement are the same reasons why ministers and political staffers are using Signal to avoid the Access to Information Act. And I think that all of these social media companies should be banned on government-issued devices.
Well, that was an answer. Appreciate that, Mr. Malone. Monsieur Villemure, pour 2 minutes et 2 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
2.5 minutes. Mr. Malone, what we're doing now is trying to fight capitalism and surveillance. What should we do to fight this capitalism and the surveillance capitalism?
It's so important to show, not tell. You need privacy and data protection laws that show Canadians you take privacy and data protection seriously. And this means government conduct must be covered by robust and updated legislation. And this also means that political parties, which are often very eager to call out the privacy harms perpetuated by private social media companies, must be covered by Canadian privacy legislation as well. I think a lot of young people who would be listening to these thrilling discussions about privacy and data protection in Canada, data harvesting and illicit interference and all this stuff, would probably come back at you with very different values because they're the ones who actually use these services. And a lot of the demographic of lawmakers and members of the executive are the folks who are specifically not using them. And I think it's really hard to build credibility with young people that these issues are being taken seriously, and surveillance capitalism in particular, unless you make these laws applicable to government conduct and the conduct of political parties.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Okay.
Thank you.
Complète, Monsieur Villemure? C'est moins de temps.
Are you done, Mr. Villemure? You still have some time.
Moins de temps. J'ai pas mon timer ici.
Okay.
Sir, I don't have my timer.
2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Mr. Andre and Mr. Massoudi, I'm going to provide you the opportunity over the next minute to provide.
D'accord. Elle vous demande un petit peu plus là-dessus.
Oh,
sorry, je m'excuse, monsieur.
I'm sorry, Mr. Villemure. Are you okay? Do you want to continue for 30 seconds? Mr. Villemure?
Problème technique.
Okay.
Technical problem.
Excuse.
I'm sorry.
Hands up. Mr. Green, sorry, go ahead, sir, for 2.5 minutes.
all the members the opportunity within 30 to 45 seconds or a minute each to just share anything that they wanted to discuss or highlight that wasn't asked. Obviously, these interventions are directed by our line of questioning. So I'll begin with Mr. Andre or Mr. Massoudi, if you want to just share for a minute what you want us to leave with here today.
Thank you for the question. I think there was a question on surveillance capitalism, which was, a concept that was introduced by Shoshana Zuboff, and it was introduced a couple of times during hearings. And the previous question on, what can we do about trying to at least mitigate the impacts of surveillance capitalism, which was really initiated by, if we were to go back, it was initiated by Google. It was Google through its, machine learning techniques that facilitated that process, and it was the inadequate regulatory and legal regimes that were in place that allowed that to happen. And so my key, I guess, if I were to provide some key recommendations or suggestions in terms of takeaways, I would say we need robust privacy laws. I think we've heard that over and over again. And I'd like to emphasize that again, is that we need to have robust privacy measures in place, specifically in area. Sorry.
No, you can. In areas of what specifically?
So specifically in areas with regard to cross-border data transfers, I think Bill C-27 could use an area that specifically identifies cross-border data transfers as an area for robust.
Okay, I'm now going to go over to Mr. Malone. Mr. Malone, you have the closeout here. Anything at all for the good and welfare of this committee that you think might have been missed?
My understanding is that folks are very concerned about potential backdoors that China might have to the type of data that's being collected by TikTok and the opportunities for China to operate as a threat actor that provides. I would say that Canada needs to show, not tell. In this area, what do I mean by that? I mean, we need to hold our own government to account to make sure that it is transparent, that it is accountable, and that it protects human rights and democracy online. You earlier had the Communication Security Establishment, the head from CCCS, speak at this committee on this study. Well, CSE will not confirm or deny whether or not it's using spyware against foreign adversaries as part of its work. And so you're not going to get an answer about whether China is doing that when Canadian authorities won't provide a clear answer either. And I would also just say, I'd really like to see whatever information CSE gave to PCO or TBS in the lead up to banning TikTok, because it's really strange that this social media app was selectively banned. And the timing is notable because it was obviously 10 days after an explosive report.
Mr. Malone, thank you.
In your opinion, was it a political decision?
Mr. Malone?
I have no opinion.
Okay. Monsieur Villemure, votre vidéo n'est...
Mr. Villemure, now your video is not frozen. Do you want 30 seconds to ask another question? Mr. Malone can continue.
Okay. Merci. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Villemure.
I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today, Mr. Malone, Mr. Andre, Mr. Masudi. Again, I would ask that if you do have any undertaking, any written documents that you'd like to provide to the clerk and the committee, please do so by Friday at 5 p.m. You've provided some pretty valuable information today, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate your patience as we went through votes and your patience for coming back. I really appreciate you coming back to committee this week. A couple of things for the sake, so I'm going to dismiss the witnesses. A couple of things for the committee, just an update. I am in receipt of an emergency meeting request. We are going to do that on Wednesday. So the notice should be out shortly. I will tell you as well that we have received confirmation from Google and Meta to appear before the committee as part of this study for Wednesday, December 13th. So we will have both those entities that will be here next week. No other business. I am going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our analysts, our clerk, and our technicians. The meeting is adjourned.